All right, hello, my name is May Skogan, and this is Who Was Louis the Pious? All right, so he was born in April 16th in 778 in France, and he died June 20th, 840 in Germany. He's commonly called Louis the Pious, but he's also known by the Latin names of Ludovicus or Clodovicus. He was appointed king of Aquitaine in 781 and was kind of like in charge of the Franks. He was co-emperor with his father Charlemagne in 813, and he soon succeeded his father as emperor in 814. He was also the monarch of his dynasty. Sorry about that. Next slide. He tried to follow in his father's footsteps and break up the kingdom into three parts, ruled by his three sons. The first one is Lothar, who is the oldest. He was proclaimed and crowned co-emperor in Aachen. He was promised succession to most of the Frankish dominions, and he would be the overlord of his brothers and cousins. Next is Pepin. He was proclaimed king of Aquitaine. He's the middle child, and his territory kind of consisted of like Gascony, the march around Toulouse, and kind of more areas like that. And then there is the third child, Louis. So there were many challenges that Louis the Pious faced, and kind of a lot of drama, I guess you could say. There's just a lot going on inside the family. First there was, this is actually kind of a good thing, this is the Ordinatio Imperii in 817. And this was this was to this was to lay out plans for the for orderly diagnostic succession. It was to keep the emperor in the emperor's spot and kind of keep the family rule, to make sure that the emperor stayed supreme or stayed in charge. There were many family issues, like Bernard's rebellion, and this was in 822. Bernard was the son of Louis in Italy, and this was a big problem because it was one of the first kind of forming of independence, or wanting that, and kind of started more conspiracies. Then there were the frontier wars, and this was kind of because there were many tribes outside of the lands that they kind of had, and the tribes were Danes, Bretons, and more kind of like that, and they all kind of started to rebel, which caused a lot of issues, but fortunately for Louis the Pious, they were all kind of squashed. Then we have the First Civil War, which was kind of a dispute over favoritism between Louis the Pious's new child Charles, which was a lot of drama because he already had 3 sons, and he started kind of showing favoritism to Charles over Lothair, the oldest son. And the youngest sons, Pippin and Louis, were kind of given more power than Lothair, because Lothair and Charles were kind of creating conflict, and to get Lothair out, because Louis the Pious favored Charles, he gave more land to Pippin and to Louis, so that they would help to banish Lothair to Italy. And there was a whole war over there. That was the First Civil War. The Second Civil War was a dispute between father and son, once again, mainly over favoritism and just, I guess, family drama that got blown out of proportion. Pippin, the middle child, was welcomed very poorly by his father and left against his father's wishes. So Louis the Pious summoned all his forces in case that there was a revolt, and there was, but from Louis, Louis the youngest child, where he was successful, but there wasn't too much successfulness. He just wanted more land. And kind of behind the scenes, which created an even bigger civil war, Lothair was kind of coming back, but this time working with Charles to gain more power. However, after a battle with Lothair, Louis the Pious against Lothair, he lost and sent his men away because they were losing and didn't want any more lives to be lost. And this was kind of this revolt by Lothair was such an act of disloyalty that the name of the battle and the area, it earned the name Field of Flies. Then Lothair went to repent for his sins, and this was his second time doing this from all the crimes that he had committed. He was branded a penitent and was never allowed to hold office again. In 1836, after this Second Civil War, after Lothair lost the power to hold office again, there was kind of peace made, and the youngest were given back the land, and Lothair had no land. Then there was the Third Civil War, where Louis the Pious gave his most favorited son, once again, some of the youngest Louis's land. So the youngest Louis revolted. And this kind of was a big thing, but not as big as the middle child Pippin dying and Charles getting more land over the youngest Louis and over Lothair, who was currently kind of out of it because he had been penitent and banished to Italy. However, when Pippin died, Charles was getting more land, and also Louis wanted Charles to take over for Pippin, but the people wanted Pippin's son to rule instead of Charles, and that's Pippin II. And then in 839, that's kind of when the Third Civil War breaks out, where Lothair comes back once again, but this time he's on his father's side, and they end up together taking the land for Louis the Pious. And so Louis the Pious kind of got pretty much what he wanted in almost all three civil wars. Because of so much family dispute, Louis placed most of his half-brothers in monasteries just kind of to avoid more uprisings. This right here is some photos that I have put in. The bottom photos, I thought it was kind of funny. It reminded me of the slides that you put in your slideshows that kind of sum everything up. It says, son of Charlemagne, lost control of his courts, local authorities, civil war, he rubs between three sons, empire is divided in 843. So it was just kind of one of those funny things that just sum everything up. And above that is kind of the map of where the kingdom kind of took place, or the empire, sorry, and kind of where everyone was ruling. You can see up in the top right corner of that photo on the left, you can see where each person had ruled. And that is all my information. Thank you so much for listening, and here am I, we're excited.